Good afternoon, Kenny Brophy. Welcome to Meet the Archaeologist.
Hello, and welcome to my living room, which is which is where I'm currently sitting.
Excellent, it's a pleasure. Could you just possibly introduce yourself a little bit and maybe your role in your university?
Okay, my name's Kenny Brophy. I'm a senior lecturer in archaeology at the University of Glasgow. I'm My main specialism in my teaching is usually related to British prehistory, in particular Scottish Neolithic, a bit of Bronze Age, general prehistory, especially at first year. But then I also do a lot of archaeological theory, landscape archaeology, and anything else that I'm called upon to really fill in. But so that for the most part, I'm kind of the department's pet prehistorian,
Okay.
really. But there is another prehistorian, Nairi Finley, but she does material culture. So I'm the pet prehistorian who doesn't do material culture.
I
So
see.
that's essentially my role in the department.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
so yeah, so
Fair.
that's the kind of stuff that I do on a day to day basis.
Okay, okay. This is where it gets interesting because being a Scottish prehistorian, I am aware that there's a whole sort of realm of Scottish prehistory, which, for better or worse, is sometimes portrayed as being very different and distinct in many ways from other forms of prehistory in Britain. And because of that, I always felt as though, for example, you had some key sites like maybe Orkney and sort of Skara Brae and this kind of thing, but it was nonetheless it was almost as though people were the knitting together, the connective tissue wasn't quite formed in terms of my introduction to the topic. Do you think this is like a slightly artificial sort of nation based bias, or do you think actually that the Scottish Neolithic is distinct from other parts of the UK?
I think it's a good question, and it's something that I've thought about a lot over the last few decades because working in a Scottish context, then quite often I'm the person, for instance, that does the Scottish stuff at the Neolithic
Mm.
Studies Group meetings, and so I'll say, okay, well, I'm going to talk about Scottish henges or Scottish cursus monuments or Scottish whatever, but that immediately sets up this idea that the Scottish material is distinctive from the English in some way, and of course that can't really be the case because there was no such thing as Scotland or England in the Neolithic. That border didn't exist. So there's a definite sense that these are artificial creations, but they're also convenient as well for lumping together a bunch of stuff under a kind of an academic bit of research.
Hmm.
But I do also think that the national boundaries do impact the way that the archaeology has been studied. Just for instance, with the boundaries of the two old royal commissions ending the Scottish England border, and therefore there was different field workers looking at different sites on either side of the Tweed. So there's a different ethos and a history of the kind of the background of field archaeology, for instance. But I think also there's definitely something quite distinctive about the aspects of the Neolithic, maybe in the eastern lowland Scotland, for instance, which is very distinctive,
Hmm.
which is kind of a bit like Yorkshire but different. And then there's things about the northeast of Scotland which is completely different in terms of things like carved stone balls, and then into the Bronze Age recumbent stone circles. There are clava cairns in Inverness-shire. There's multiple stone rows in Caithness which could be Neolithic or Bronze Age. And I think actually what's more likely is what we're talking about are very different overlapping regional distributions of stuff in the prehistory.
Hmm.
Some things are found everywhere, and some things are found in very, very small areas. And there's not any rhyme or reason to why that might be, because these are not defined regions or zones or anything like that. They're just places where people did stuff,
Hmm.
and some stuff made sense to them. They liked it. They made things in certain ways. Other things they did it their own way, and it was different. So I don't think it's really to do with Scotland and England. It's just to do with the fact that prehistory was incredibly complicated,
Mm-hmm.
which
Mm-hmm.
is a which is a very long-winded way of answering your question.
No, not at all,
But
not at
it
all.
will.
Because I mean, as I said to you, sort of off camera now, I guess. I'm from North Wales, and architecture, the archaeology there is sometimes people have tried to sort of characterise it as very distinct, especially, for example, the hill forts in the north. Um, but actually there is also lots of connections, and so I find it fascinating, especially when, for example, I mean I remember having a discussion with a student who just happened to be from Scotland, but she was very adamant that the sort of brochs and that sort of thing was such a distinctive thing that so as to almost be removed and should be removed in our minds from the same ideas as was being developed in the rest of the country, and but as you say, in that sense, that can't necessarily be true. And yet, what I find interesting is that recently you came to my attention actually because of your comments with regards to Orkney. So the BBC's coverage of the Orkney Islands, and you were calling for more weirdness. And so is this another example of this sort of regional variation?
It certainly is. I mean, Orkney is clearly distinctive in lots of different ways in the Neolithic, and the programme that was on the BBC, Britain's Ancient Capital, Secrets of Orkney, was in part a celebration of the amazing Neolithic stuff in Orkney, and the Ness of Brodgar is an amazing site, one of the most important excavations in the world, I would say, just now. Amazing, incredible stuff, some quite good experimental stuff, but also but for some reason they seem to want to inject into the programme this kind of mild peril of a theory they had to try and prove, which was this idea that somehow Orkney had led to Stonehenge, which doesn't really make much sense anyway. So they had this kind of rather artificial conceit that ran through the whole programme, and really a lot of my complaining about the programme was more based on the fact that why did they need to introduce this theory, this idea that they wanted to explore, which by definition they already accepted by including it in the programme, a theory that's not really that widely accepted by any prehistorians, and certainly expressed in very simplistic terms. I think that the audience could have coped with a bit more complexity. So I think for me, I felt that actually Orkney's Neolithic is really weird. There's no doubt about it. There's stuff up there you don't find anywhere else. For instance, figurines are a good example of that. We don't have Neolithic figurines from anywhere else in Britain, and they weren't mentioned for some reason. Instead, what they wanted to do was to focus on some of the stuff that we do find in other places, and then use it, like for instance, the houses that they found at Durrington Walls, which have got similarities with the Arcadian houses, or grooveware or stone circles or whatever, and then try and normalise it in some way. And actually I think that they could have gone further, they could have pushed it further, and I don't think there's anything offensive to say that Orkney was a completely weird, bizarre place in the Neolithic that would have been mind-blowing for anyone who went there, and would have been difficult to recognise for anyone who'd got the proverbial animal skin boat over from Caithness and landed in Orkney, and their mind would have been blown.
Yeah, well, without a doubt. I mean, frankly, just I haven't yet had a chance to get up there and see what's being uncovered at the moment, but it's just people are sort of calling it like a Neolithic cathedral, this kind of thing, the stuff that's being found. But yeah, but I suppose, as you say, there has been a tendency with some academic trends to talk about things like grooved ware pottery making their way south through the country, and as you say, almost in like a teleological kind of perspective, aiming for Stonehenge, as though Stonehenge is the inevitable pinnacle. And that, without a doubt, I mean, I've got a massive problem with people focusing on that one monument, anyway. But that, without a doubt, it is a very modern perspective. And also, frankly, it's a very modern geopolitical perspective as well. This idea that somehow the South becomes more important. But I suppose what would be your antidote then for that? Because I mean, for example, my antidote that I've sort of said to people in the past, a couple of people in the past, has been, blue sky thinking. I'd like to see like a moratorium on any new theories being put forward for Stonehenge. No crackpot theories, no grand treaties. Leave Stonehenge alone for a bit and focus on other monuments, and then return, and maybe try and encourage the public to think about the Neolithic and the Bronze Age, then that whole transition as a continuum, as more than just one monument. I mean, what would be your antidote?
I guess the antidote would be to try and find ways to give a sense of the variability of the British Neolithic. For instance, on the TV programme they missed a great opportunity, because they did get a boat that they made. They sailed across the Pentland Firth. They arrived in the north coast of Caithness. If they just spent some time in Caithness saying, right, okay, well, what was here, and when Orkney was going through this incredible boom, what was happening in Caithness? And then they may well have had to conclude bugger all, because In Caithness and the late Neolithic, there's almost nothing that we can firmly date to, that's contemporary with Skara Brae, Nessa Brodgar, all Maze How, all that kind of stuff. So that I mean, okay, so it doesn't make great TV having that nothingness, but it does give that sense of variability. Or go to Yorkshire and explore, incredible henge monuments that were painted white with gypsum, or where they had boar's tusks engraved and incredible lavish rich burials like Duggleby Howe. Go to other parts of the country. They've got really distinctive monuments. Go to Cornwall, go to Anglesey, go to the Pembrokeshire coast, see amazing dolmen with the kind of floating stones above the supports and uprights.
Or for example, the monuments where it's I believe some people reckon that maybe you'd have upturned trees in burial mounds and this kind of thing. With their root systems in the air, this kind of, as you say, the variability, and so do you think that would help to sort of decharacter, or rather decartoonify the period, perhaps?
I think it would be. I think that people could cope with the complexity, because people understand variability. They understand local identities and regional identities, and I think they can understand that people in Yorkshire did things differently in Neolithic from people in Cornwall or people in different parts of Ireland, or in Belgium, But I just don't think that textured nature of the Neolithic life comes through. So I think that there's a sense it has to be all or nothing. If you want to explain what it was like to be alive in the Neolithic period, then you can only fall back on one model or one uniform way of explaining that. And actually, it would have been incredibly variable, and there would have been stuff going on that we couldn't understand and wouldn't make any sense to us, in terms of how the dead were disposed of, or monuments construction and scales that are mind blowing. So I think all of these things, and I think you're right. You're this idea of trying to remove this kind of cartoonish dominance of Stonehenge, much more so than Orkney. I mean, Orkney's just like the minor partner in this problem. For instance, when do you ever hear about the Neolithic of Pembrokeshire? Only when someone says, "Oh, look, there's a quarry for Stonehenge." And yet the archaeology is incredible there in its own right. So it's just that kind of in prehistory, everything was sucked towards Stonehenge. All the analysis has been done at Durrington Walls of cattle bones and pig bones. They were bringing in animals from all over the place, shooting them, having giant barbecues, according to Mike Parker Pearson. And it's just the same now, but it's just like all of the attention, all of the focus is being sucked in from around the rest of Britain into Stonehenge. And it isn't always happening like that, but it does feel quite it's quite a weighty kind of presence. And a lot of the stuff that I do in my career is to try and get away from that stuff and think, well, okay, in Orkney as well, it's just thinking, well, actually, what's happening in prehistory in other places? Let's explore that and see what's going on. And quite often you find really weird and interesting stuff happening in really unexpected places where the archaeology might be knackered, but actually it tells a nice story that is maybe more accessible to people than necessarily just going for glory all the time.
Yeah.
I never go for glory.
Well, frankly, this year, in terms of the Six Nations, neither does Wales. But no, and actually, it's funny how, because the way that you describe that is quite interesting, because it sort of brings to mind this idea almost as Stonehenge as having become, and I don't mean this in the negative sense, but in the true physical sense of a black hole. It's become this sort of irresistible force certainly in the popular vision of prehistory, and especially the Neolithic Bronze Age. And so it's an intriguing thing. And so Orkney. I mean, frankly, I'd encourage everyone at home just to research other periods. I try to do my best, and indeed this year I'll be doing my best as well to focus on other sites as well, and also notably, people will notice I've never talked about Stonehenge on ArchaeoSoup for this very reason. So
You have in the past occasionally.
Well, no. But I've never focused
only to talk about the limitations of cognitive archaeology.
Exactly. So thank you for that. Thank you. 'Cause I was curious about the weirdness, and I think you've answered that really quite nicely. And actually, in that sense, as you say, people they can live with variability in the same way that people in South London and Glasgow today lived slightly different lives. The same would go for the people, or indeed more so for people back then. So people can handle it.
But they still all have iPhones. That's the thing. Some things are the same and some things are different. Yeah. That's life.
Exactly. Yeah. So so there'd be transferable sort of patterns in terms of tools or whatever, but the subtlety would be different. And more to the point, the truth then therefore would be different for those different places. Yeah, definitely. Okay. Okay. Well, we're just going to move on to the key questions that I ask sort of everyone in this series, so as to have a certain amount of sort of not compatibility, cross-referenceability, and this is really just with a view to trying to get to the heart of what's it like being an archaeologist. And so for you, what's the most satisfying thing about being an archaeologist? What do you find? What gets you up in the morning?
I think that the most satisfying thing for me is the deep time that I get to deal with. I think the fact that I'm dealing with things that are, as a prehistorian, that are not just a few centuries old or a few generations, but thousands of years old. So, there's a simple pleasure about, for instance, standing at an archaeological site with a group of school children and just saying, "Did you know this is 5,000 years old?" And it never tires, to have that sense of expression. Mm-hmm. So I think that being an archaeologist, it gives me a real awareness of time depth, and even in places that appear to be very modern, there's often lurking beneath the surface somewhere something that could be thousands of years old. And so as an archaeologist, I think that what gets me up in the morning, as it were, apart from a desperate need for caffeine, is this kind of a desire to tell people how deep the time is beneath their feet. And it isn't necessarily measured in meters, but it's certainly measured in millennia, and that's what excites me.
Okay. Do you ever therefore do what I know I do, and I know quite a few other people who do this? Do you ever therefore sometimes have a perspective that slightly frustrates people around you? So, for example, my wife often tells me off, Mrs. Soup, for sort of going, yes, but the thing is, people just don't seem to understand when it comes to national identity that actually in prehistory, blah 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 blah. Do you ever does that perspective ever sort of mean that you have a slightly a different, almost an unreal view of the world? Do you think?
Yeah, I think it gives you it gives you a different view of things like landscape, for instance, when you're out and about in the landscape. And so my wife's a geographer, and so she's always very interested in reading the landscape in terms of geomorphology and stuff like that, which is far too old for me. In terms of that, I can't get my head around things that are millions of years old. But for whenever I'm in the landscape, it's difficult for me to see the world in a way that isn't about almost like having these kind of temporal X-ray specs on that are always thinking about, okay, well, that's what it's like now, but what was it like in the past, and how has it changed through time? And so I guess I don't know whether it frustrates other people or not, because I tend to not necessarily expose my inner thoughts too often to others, but I think that it means I have a specific way of looking at the world, which is never surface. It's never superficial. It's always looking for what's beneath, in a sense. And maybe sometimes that it sounds like I don't live in the real world, but actually I do, because I'm quite interested in how that pastness and deep time interacts with the real world. But I can't really look at things and just take in a 2D surface appearance. I always have to imagine what's beneath, what was before, what happened, how did it get to that position. So that may or may not be annoying, but once you've kind of gone down that route, it's difficult to go back again, I guess.
Yeah. I think it is very. It is very difficult to go back, and I think it's enriching without a doubt. And as you say, it's not like I go around saying to everyone, but certainly in the car sometimes I'll be maybe having a slight rant and I get told off.
Train journeys. I mean, it's difficult to do a train journey without constantly looking out the window and just thinking, well, look, there's a bing from an old mine, there's this, that, and the other, and there's an old railway line that you can't really see anymore, but you can read it in the field, and it's just like you never really switch off from it.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you for that. That was a good answer. The next question is, what challenges do you think are on the horizon for archaeology? What do you think is coming up for archaeology?
I think that there's challenges which are not necessarily always fair, and are certainly not driven by us as archaeologists, but challenges to increasingly justify our existence, not just within academia, although that's definitely something that's under threat, but also in general, archaeologists, or archaeology as a business that is viewed within current climates as being something which could be a drag on economic development. It could be viewed as something which is expensive and costly and a luxury. And I think that in a time when there's a focus on trying to grow the economy, to build houses, to sort of erode the qualities of the green belt, and to fulfill all of the kind of the requirements of, I guess, of the capitalist system, archaeology seems a bit of an anachronism almost. The fact that before before you want to make this big thing happen, you have to get these archaeologists in to look at the site, and ultimately, I fear that at some point in the future that will become too much of a burden for some elements of society to continue to take. I hope that's not the case. I mean, last week I went out on site and visited an excavation in Angus of an incredible site where they found a bronze hoard and an enormous Neolithic timber hall. The site director took me around the site and explained that it was being built. This was being excavated in advance of the construction of 2 football pitches by the local council. And I just thought, at what point does society turn around and say, okay, so to build 2 football pitches, you've had to do X £100,000 worth of archaeology, and at some point those decisions may start to turn against us, and I don't think they will in the future. So although there's a lot of stuff just now in the media about actually we need archaeologists because there's these big, Crossrail and massive the high-speed railway and all those massive developments that are going on, where there's almost not enough archaeologists to cope. At some point, maybe someone will decide, well, actually, do we need all these archaeologists anyway? Do these things really need to happen? Do we go down the route of where in Ireland, where sampling in advance of development gets to a lesser and lesser proportion? So I think that my fear, a big challenge for archaeologists for us to justify our existence in both the commercial and academic sector. And so I think that this, by default, pushes us towards being more public orientated and having to demonstrate our value to society in a range of different ways. And I think that can't be measured in pounds and pence. So I think the challenge is for archaeologists to actually face up to that reality, rather than to imagine that somehow if we just sign enough petitions and hug enough hill forts, that bad things like house building won't happen. That's not the reality of the world. So I think we need to, the challenge for us is to engage with the economic reality going forward. Not to give in, but to work in different ways to maintain our kind of valuable and vital role in society.
No, well, thank you for that. Thank you. Actually, in this afternoon, after we're done here, I'll be recording with someone a little segment about news stories, and one of them is going to be mentioning, for example, the Oswestry hill forts, where they just had their hill fort hug. And as you say, that's definitely a valid point to bring to it, in so much as. And actually, this sort of also actually comes back to what we were just talking about in terms of the fact that you can't switch off your perspective. In so much as I think lots of archaeologists, they find it really hard to understand that people don't necessarily immediately see the value in what is so obvious to them. So you could go, well, that's a wonderful, that's a wonderful medieval landscape. You don't want to build on that, and people go, what are you talking? So as you say, maybe bringing people along with you, helping them put on the specs, perhaps, but also perhaps being a bit more, as you say, open and maybe even forthright in I suppose being creative about the applications of archaeology as well.
Yeah. And I think we have to be creative now in a range of different ways. And I'm not for a minute saying that a lot of these battles that are being fought aren't important in various different ways. But I think that actually, the Stonehenge tunnel is another good example where essentially there's a knee-jerk reaction to have a petition, to complain, to say, oh, this just can't happen. And actually, the reality is that the way that the world works is through compromise and through discussion and through information sharing and through reaching positions that is mutually beneficial for everyone. And I think sometimes archaeologists are quite bad at being compromisers, and maybe some would argue we shouldn't compromise. But I think actually, if we continue to be viewed as being as people who hold up change in the landscape, for instance, then that might come to eventually reflect badly on us when decisions are being made. So I'd prefer to think that we archaeologists can be active members of society and help improve everyone's lives and everyone's facilities and infrastructure, but at the same time add value to people's lives through our understanding of the past that's often revealed through these very developments.
Exactly. And I think often these conversations need to start with archaeologists, frankly, reminding themselves as much as anyone else when the big question is asked, like, what's the point of archaeology? One of the first responses is, well, we're finding what's new about the past. We're not just regurgitating known facts. Otherwise, that would be a completely pointless exercise.
Yes, yeah.
You know, we're finding new stuff. That's the point. And actually, it's interesting because this just want to just touch briefly on in your sort of broader interests. I see that you're interested in, for example, the idea of performance theory and practice, and bringing the public in on sort of grand gestures which are linked with archaeological ideas and theory. And do you think that's also possibly part of the way forward? Is almost sort of the findings of archaeology partly as, I suppose, educational entertainment, almost, I suppose, or this kind of thing?
I think, well, yeah, I think that's one of the things I do is with Gavin McGregor of Northlight Heritage, who are based in Glasgow, and we have this thing called Build and Burn, which we're developing, and we've had a few events where we try and use a combination of experimental archaeology and fire to create memorable and exciting and entertaining experiences that kind of evoke something of being prehistoric. So, and as part of that process, I mean, Gavin's much more artistic than me, and he has had artwork exhibited and stuff like that, and he's very interested in performance and creating art. I mean, I'm more interested in just doing things that interest me, and I think that actually, as archaeologists, we can be quite creative at how we bring the past back to life, and often that's because the past is in such a shoddy state that really it requires a bit of an intermediary to try and make sense of it, because it's difficult to get the public really engaged in a burnt stump of a post, that was burnt down 5,000 years ago, and yet it's quite easy to get them to engage with a 6-meter post in front of them that's on fire, and about to fall over, then assuming they're standing at a safe distance from the post. So it's quite a simple principle, really, but I think actually that if you can bring that to life, and then you can also maybe add in a bit of music, a bit of performance, me in a shaman costume, it's like a winning combination, really. So, so it's about getting a balance between entertaining people, but also about trying to make it a meaningful, informative experience, because if people take away nothing other than the fact that I don't really suit a leopard skin onesie, then that we've not really achieved our aim. But if people take away the fact that in prehistory there was a real concern and interest with taking bits of wood and burning them and creating memorable experiences for ritual or ceremonial reasons, then that maybe brings an element of the past alive that people would not necessarily otherwise think about. And the key thing there is that quite often burnt posts are exactly the kind of thing that are found when you're excavating in advance of an urban development. So if you're able to say to someone, well, your house is built in an area where there was a lot of these timber structures with lots of post holes, and now let's show you this experience that brings that alive, then it suddenly adds a huge amount of value to their understanding of where they live. So it's a kind of combination of good old-fashioned archaeology, but also a bit of kind of creative showmanship, which I think can go a long way. And it's not for everyone, but it certainly is something that I enjoy being involved in. So and I like a big fire.
Yeah, well, I was trying to imagine you trying to combine the onesie and being a lecturer. But then, no.
No, not at the same time.
But actually, in that sense, it's the word that comes to mind is texture. It feels as though actually it's the ability. It's not again in that sense, you're not able to necessarily fill in an absolute truth and say here this was happening definitely, but rather it's a texture of what was, and it's a flavour, it's the smell,
Exactly. I think that's right. Yeah, it's that kind of sensory. It's like a kind of a taster menu of the past.
Yeah. Okay. Archaeology as tapas. I like it. Okay. Well, finally, I suppose the question that I ask everyone, and it is, I understand this is slightly cliched, but lots of people do ask me this, and therefore I like to ask other people this, is what advice would you give to aspiring archaeologists? So whether they're young or old, whether they're about to go to uni or whether they just want to sort of dip their toe, what sort of advice would you give?
I guess my advice would be, and I think for me, someone who's an aspiring archaeologist is someone who loves it, someone who's mad for it, and I see that in the eyes of a lot of our students. They just can't get enough of it. They love it, and that's an absolute fundamental to make it in the business. I think it's difficult to go through an archaeological career like with the eyes of a dead-eyed shark, and just be doing it for the wage packet at the end of the week, which for most archaeologists is a poor return. So I think that the key thing is you have to really love it. You have to really be mad for it, and you have to really want to do it and be passionate for it.
Hmm.
And then I think beyond that, it's really just about dedication and hard work. I mean, I always say to our students, and this is in the context of how do you get a job in archaeology, how do you get a career in archaeology? That if you work hard, if you've got that passion, if you're absolutely dedicated, you will get a job in archaeology.
Hmm.
I'm not going to say that's going to be a good job, which is the sting in the tail, but it's going to be a job, and if you stick at it, you will get there in the end. And it's got lots of rewards, and I think archaeology now is going in really exciting directions, because more and more, even really hard-nosed commercial organisations are doing lots of public engagement, community archaeology, liaising with local groups, going into schools and doing stuff. And for a lot of our students, that's a really exciting thing. The opportunity to actually meet with other people other than archaeologists and share their passion with them. And so I think that if you remember that as an archaeologist you are part of a bigger society, if you have that passion and if you're prepared to work hard and put up with some financial and geographical inconvenience for a while, then you'll make it in the business. So that's the kind of stuff that I just say to my students all the time. Yeah. Until I get sick of it, but
no, it's valuable. It's valuable advice, definitely. I mean, I remember one of the most valuable, but also one of the most hardest things I had to hear as a student was pretty much on week 2. I just arrived. I was like, hey, woo! And someone just said, all right, okay, most of you won't make it to be archaeologists. It's really difficult. but as you say, the key was if you love it and if you have the passion, then you can follow it through. And I think that's that. I think so, possibly I think maybe in that particular week, the person I'm thinking of was a bit annoyed because some people had handed in some very dodgy essays, but again, it came down to the fact that it's not easy, but your passion can see you through, certainly.
Yeah. I think, I mean, it is a cliche, but it's a vocation. It's not really a normal or traditional job, and
no.
You have to turn your hand to a lot of different things, as well. So ultimately, you have to be creative in that sense too. So I think it's if you've got an imagination, then it's a great place to go, really, career wise or hobby wise or whatever. So
excellent. Okay, well, speaking of places to go, I'm sure you have places to be and go, but
I'm just going to stay sitting here for the rest of the afternoon.
Oh, fair enough. Well, let's just keep talking. Okay, I've got places to go, but I suppose one final thing then, in terms of what comes next, what's on the horizon for you? What sort of research are you up to then?
I've got a few. Well, I've got some. And I'm kind of developing my whole urban prehistory thing, where I'm trying to look at the opportunities created by usually knackered prehistoric sites in urban locations. And so I did the Cockno Stone last year, where helped reveal a huge rock art panel in Clydebank in Glasgow, which has been buried for 50 years. And so one of the key things I'm looking at now is to try and talk to the local people there. I'm going to do that next month, about what they would like to happen next, because we had to bury the stone again. Do they want a replica? Do they want the stone uncovered? And that kind of thing. So it's about trying to explore where we are with the local community there. And I've got a few other urban prehistory projects on the go as well, about hopefully talking to developers, thinking about ways that we can add value to new build schools with the prehistory that's uncovered when they're building them, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of stuff I want to develop about using urban prehistory to try and take things forward and create exciting projects. So that's kind of the main research focus, and I've also got to write up 10 years worth of excavations as well.
Oh, well, the little things, yeah.
Yeah, that's a little task I've got to do for the next 18 months as well. Yeah.
18 months, wow, that's quite impressive in terms of time span, relative to the length of the dig. Okay. Well, good luck with that, I guess. I'll put a link to your blog below, actually, as well.
Thank you.
People can check that out. It's well worth a look at, definitely. And in particular, as I was saying to you, just as we were setting up, I was intrigued by some of your terminology, things like selfish walks and sort of and as you say, urban prehistory. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. So definitely worth looking at. Yeah, cool. Well, at some point, if it's okay, I might check back in with you just to see how things go, especially with the urban prehistory stuff and also the performance elements. I'm intrigued by that. But nonetheless, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for having me.